I'm Dominic Steele, Paul's letter to the Romans, and I want to take you back and tell you a story. It's a long time ago, it's before I was married, and I had several weeks holiday in London, and I spent the days wandering around the city, and one day I was going on my own to the London Museum. Just outside the entrance to the London Museum on a massive plaque is an extract from the diary of John Wesley, and it was diary entry from 1738. It was massive. It was significantly taller than me. And in the diary entry from Wesley, and Wesley's in a situation where he's been off to the Americas. He'd been preaching what he thought was the gospel in America, but to nil response. So he had come, he was really preaching a thing of, you've got to be holy, you've got to be acceptable to God. It was kind of an Anglo-Catholic gospel. Anyway, heavy-hearted, he's come back to London feeling a failure, and he's gone along to a group meeting that evening in a Moravian chapel on Aldersgate Street in London. Effectively, it was a Bible study. And they're sitting around in a little group, and somebody is reading Martin Luther's preface to the Epistle to the Romans. And Wesley describes the experience as somebody was reading the Epistle to the Romans, he's listening to what was being said, he felt his heart strangely warmed. Here's the key sentence from his diary. This is 1738. I felt I did trust in Christ, Christ alone for salvation, and an assurance was given me that he'd taken away my sins, even mine, and saved me from the law of sin and death. Now, that's John Wesley talking about his experience of coming to saving faith in Jesus Christ. He's taken away my sins. He did it. Even mine. Saved me. Now, if I reflect over Wesley was listening to the reading of Luther's preface to the Romans, and if I move over to Luther himself, well, it was Luther in his own experience centuries earlier reading Romans 1:17. And the line is, in the gospel, Romans 1:17, in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it's written, the righteous shall live by faith. And Luther had been attempting to make himself good enough for God and been failing. And yet here's the line, the righteous shall live by faith. Now, there is a consensus that verse, Romans 1:17, it is the topic verse for the whole book of Romans. The righteous shall live by faith. The righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. And in terms of understanding the gospel, the lights came on for Luther. He came to understand, this is what R.C. Sproul says in summary, he came to understand what Paul was speaking of was a righteousness that God in his grace would make available to those who would receive it passively, not those who would achieve it by doing stuff, but you'd receive it by faith, by trust, and by which a person could be reconciled to a holy and a righteous God. Now, after that introduction, what's the plot of the book of Romans? Well, I'm just going to flick through Paul's letter to the Romans. So, Romans 1:17, it'd been kind of background, key verse, Romans 1:17. Romans 1:18, for this reason, for God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And Romans 1:18 to the end of the chapter is essentially God's judgment on the immoral. Well, what about the moral? What about the people who think they're doing the right thing? Well, he says, chapter 2, you then have no excuse. Every one of you who judges, you're without excuse, for when you judge another, you condemn yourself. And then so the logic of chapter 1, chapter 2 is, well, the immoral person's not right before God, the moral person's not right before God, not even the moral Jew is right before God. And so you get to the situation really halfway through chapter 3, well then everyone is in the wrong before God. There's no one righteous, not even one, no one who seeks God, no one who understands. And so we get to chapter 3, verse 21, but now, apart from the law, apart from trying to keep the law, God has revealed a new way of attaining righteousness. The righteousness of God is revealed, that the law and the prophets testified, this righteousness by faith in Jesus Christ. Well, if you can get righteousness by faith in Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ, God declares you right when you're wrong. God is right when he declares you right when you're wrong. That's an extraordinary thing. That's Romans chapter 3, verse 25. And so, well, what place is boasting? Chapter 4, verse 1. What then shall we say? How can we boast? No, you cannot boast. There's no place for boasting. Chapter 4. So chapter 5, well, we have peace with God if we're righteous, and that is wonderful. If God has declared us righteous, we're at peace with him. And so chapter 6, there's new life in Christ. A new life of, and we shouldn't go sinning. Shouldn't keep sinning. And then chapter 7, the illustration from marriage. Well, that's a bit complex, the whole thing going on in chapter 7. But essentially he's saying, look, resist the sin that you're tempted to do and do the good. And then chapter 8, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. God has set you free. He's done what the law could not do. The Spirit has done. And so rejoice in that, even though you are struggling. We're going through a life of groans to glory. Then chapter 9, 10 and 11 is dealing with election. And, well, did God choose it? Yes, he did. Well, is that fair? Yes, it is. And then chapter 12, well, therefore, since God has been merciful to me, well, how should I live? I should offer my body as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to him. And this is my spiritual act of worship. And then that argument of what my living sacrifice life looks like runs from chapter 12 through 13 through 14, beginning of 15, and then chapter 16 is the kind of local details of what's going on in terms of Paul relating to the people in Rome and then planning to go on to Spain. So that's a brief overview of the book of Romans. See you tomorrow morning for Daily Bible Time. God bless.